One thing we haven't talked about yet that I'd like to get your thoughts about is how you talk to the students about conveying something through the music and making inflections in the music that actually create a mood or communicate an idea or something like that. Could you talk about how you started with that with the students and how you continue to talk to them about that?
Sure. The first tune that my students played was "Give It Up" for 2 notes, and if you're familiar with the tune, I mean, you know that there's a fermata over a rest, and that's a perfect time to be able to talk about tension and drama, and what the audience is going to be thinking and hanging on, and how long they hang on, and if it matters how long they hang on or whatnot, and there's also a stinger note on the end. There's like a rest and then another note, and then the first 4 bars are repeated. So within that first song, there's so much we can talk about how we're going to make somebody listen to this song. And the first concept that I started with my students with musical expression was the repeat sign, because we had 4 bars and we're going to state something to the audience. We're going to state this is our 4 bars, and then we have a repeat sign. Well, they've already heard that statement, so you got to change it in some way. And I have a conversation with my students. How can we change that? What can we do to change it? And then eventually, if not right away, they would come up with, we could play it at a different volume, we could put it louder or softer. That's perfect. Let's say it one way loud, and then on the repeat, let's do it something completely different. Let's say it soft, because the audience hasn't heard that yet. And then maybe we'll go back to loud over here, and then we have this fermata, and then we can do soft, and then the stinger note on the end can be loud. And there's so much you can talk about with just that first piece of music that I used with the kids. We didn't have to wait until later on. And I'm not expecting a very large dynamic range from the students at this point, if any, from the brass players. It's just not the idea that dynamics are supposed to be there, and they're trying to think about something differently. The third song in the book was strutting that 2-note stuff again, and that was 4 bars, and then it was a rest, and then another 4 bars, and a rest, and another 4 bars. And so those rests, I would say to students, well, we're pretty much doing the same thing again, aren't we? They're like, yeah, that's kind of like a repeat sign, even though it's not written out. So let's change dynamics. What dynamic do you want to start? Let's start piano. Okay, let's work that out. And then let's switch it up to forte later on. And just simple, extreme dynamic changes: loud, soft. And then maybe later on we'll add some crescendos and some different inflection things. But that's something that any student can understand from day one. The difference between loud and soft is not hard. And when you repeat something, you're going to say it a different way. Another easy concept. So that means that any piece of music that we play, after we learn the notes and rhythms, or maybe even before we learn the notes and rhythms, we're going to start thinking about what this music is expressing and the different ways that we're going to play it, to where later on in the book, when they see a piece of music that's in ABA form, they can say, well, this is ABA, this is AABB. And that means that we're going to need to do something different each time we see the A section. And my students can talk to you like this. And you would think that was a pretty mature thing for the 6th graders to do in most classrooms, but in my classroom it's just pretty normal, and it's kind of almost boring sometimes. This is ABA, that's pretty obvious, Ms. Bergeron, why are you asking us this? That kind of thing.
Yeah, what's interesting, Jen, hearing you talk about that, I don't know of an instance where I've observed a teacher at the beginning of learning music talk about the audience. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That already you're thinking about somebody's going to be listening to this, and what we're doing is making decisions about what we want them to think, what we want them to hear in this, and that's really quite unique.
Right, the melodies in the book, and the structure of the tunes, they lend themselves really well to that, because they look and feel like real music. Those could be excerpts from, any larger piece, mm-hmm. or they could stand alone by themselves. And, kids see it has a title, and as a composer, and it's a real piece of music, and we got to get the audience to know that we're strutting our 2 notes, or whatever it is, we're wiggling it like we mean it. And, and the kids just thinking about, we use the audience all the time as something we talk about. What is the audience going to think if you play that again this exact same way? They're going to get bored, so you got to play it again differently. And that's something that other method books don't have. It's 8 bars, and when it's, whole notes and whole rests, what's the audience? And no audience is ever going to listen to that, so you don't even need to worry about what they would think, if they ever heard it. So it's hard to talk about that stuff, with maybe some other groups of melodies. But I really like the length of the melodies in the book, because 32 bars, sometimes even longer than that. That really gives kids a time to develop an idea and change dynamics in there, and think about phrasing, and they can think about all kinds of stuff. Mm-hmm. And we take some melodies, and just like you would if you were writing a piece for a larger ensemble and you were doing some orchestration things, the first time you hear the melody stated, it might be in the flutes, and then the second time you hear it, it might be in the clarinet. So I might say flutes, play this, and then clarinets play this, and that will make it more interesting to listen to.
Uh-huh.
And the kids, I mean, they really, that's why music is fun. That's why you and I study music, because it's fun to think about and express and convey something to an audience. But if there's no audience there, and there's no potential of your music ever being even in structure to be listened to by an audience, then it's not nearly as fun to be in music class.
Yeah.
You said that other method, what you're talking about now is the stuff that other method books don't have. And if I didn't know better, though, I could look at our method book, a student book, and say, well, it's not there either, because we haven't written in dynamic markings, for example. And we haven't written in every retard that might be used.
With the student books, they don't have dynamics written in, they don't have crescendos written in, but if you're a good teacher, you can get students to understand that in a piece of music that I'm going to play on, my professional instrument, there aren't going to necessarily be dynamics written in either. The music lends itself to do certain things, and there's not always one right answer and one wrong answer. So if it said forte at the beginning and then piano 4 bars later, kids would think that they were just following directions. But when kids get to kind of make up their own directions and see what sounds good, and then try and start this piece piano, and then realize that it really should be started forte. I mean, it's that whole process of kind of figuring things out that makes them into musicians. So they can take a new piece of music and look at it and realize that there's repetition in it, or that there's some sequencing of notes which indicates that a crescendo might be appropriate. And I mean that's really fun for students to be able to figure out. So when you look at the book and you see the absence of all those things, you should also see the presence of all the other stuff that lends itself, the length of the songs and the repetition in a lot of the songs, I think lends itself to the students wanting to make it not boring.
Mm-hmm.